Hi, welcome to today's webinar where I will be presenting with Sean Devlin, and today we've reached part 3 of the series. Part 1 and 2 are recorded, and those recordings are available on our website. We will send you the link somewhere today to those recordings if you're interested in viewing them maybe for the first time or for another time. And today we're going to be talking about cloud considerations, and that means looking at multi-tenancy, customizations, dealing with multiple languages, and other issues associated with moving to the cloud. By the way, I forgot to mention this in the introduction. If you have any questions, then feel free to post them in the questions channel. We'll have time at the end to cover some of the questions. At the same time, we try to keep these webinars short because there are 6 of them. So our goal is to keep it within 25 minutes. So first of all, let's look at which companies are choosing for cloud and how are they doing, and how does this affect the delivery of their applications.
Yeah, maybe we can back up for a minute, Jan, before that, and talk, just a review of what's driving cloud adoption. I think most people hear this by now, but it's mainly reducing costs and capitalizing on new opportunities. And we work with a lot of ISVs, and many of whom are in the process of or have done, who've moved their offerings to the cloud, and they can see a great reduction in maintenance and operation costs. And some cost savings are passed directly to consumers in the form of infrastructure as a service. They no longer have to support hardware on site. We see a lot of ISVs who get out of the rut of running multiple concurrent versions, so that can take a great burden of maintenance off. Moreover, ISVs can also take advantage of new opportunities, including more options over traditional pricing models. So for example, your customers could be charged per invoice or per document uploaded versus only a flat fee. And this can be more attractive and easier to market in many cases. It's also far easier to introduce application monitoring, and analyze application usage. And this has allowed ISVs that we work with to focus on which features are used the most and to learn which features are not used, or how the application is being navigated. And finally, end users get the benefit of more frequent releases, often faster turnarounds on bug fixes and enhancements because of the delivery model.
Yeah, so if we take a quick look at financials, how are some of the companies that are adopting cloud doing? And I've just selected 2 companies in the space: QAD, a mid-sized ERP vendor, active worldwide, and Oracle, obviously very well known as a software company, one of the largest. And what you see here is that for both companies, the traditional licenses, and in fact, Oracle is only going down slowly, 4%. But if you look at QAD's reportings, this is the revenue they reported in the last report. Their license revenues declining very sharply. At the same time, their subscription, which is their cloud revenue, is growing very, very quickly. So it is an industry trend that is happening, and it is happening much faster than was anticipated by a lot of the analysts. So if you're not doing it yet as an ISV, then now is the time to start doing it.
Yeah, so I think in this webinar we focus mainly on the architecture of a cloud offering, which is a single instance, moving towards a single instance multi-tenancy, and then what some of the challenges are when you do that, delivering customizations, dealing with localization, and then of course how to scale out, scale up, and to keep things running. So we talk first about multi-tenancy. Quickly, just a review of what are the types of of multi-tenancy, or how can this be set up, because it doesn't mean just one thing. It really varies according to which resources are shared. In general, the more resources which are shared, the greater the operational benefits. And then on the other direction, the more resources which are isolated, then you get a greater security buffer between instances. So it's kind of along that spectrum. The most common and successful approaches that we see in ISVs that we work with are when application instances are shared, and in many of those cases, they are also sharing a single database. We sometimes see isolation where security and regulatory requirements dictate, but by far the most common we see is sort of the right two blocks on this diagram. In any event, be sure that when you're choosing for multi-tenant architecture, you pick the right tools and architecture that suits your organization. Jan, maybe you can talk a bit deeper about the two different kinds of multi-tenancy that we see the most.
Yeah, absolutely. So the two most used are database-driven and application server-driven. And some database vendors support multi-tenancy as part of their offering, which is very easy to set up because the filtering is fully automatic based on the username that connects to the database. But the downside is that the load on your database is going to be much higher because you'll have much more dedicated connections that are being used. So multi-tenancy can also be implemented on the application tier, and most often that is the best route to go. There are some cases where you have to go database-based. For example, in healthcare, there are situations where you need to have a physical database per hospital if you're serving multiple hospitals. But application server driven usually is the better of the two. It's easier to manage, and the load on your database server is going to be much lower, and you also have more flexibility because you can also do things like combine multiple tenants in your application.
Yeah, one of the challenges once you have multi-tenancy solved is to deal with customizations, because I think any ISV out there knows that customers ask for different things, and sometimes you end up in the position where you've done something specific for one customer and then done it a bit differently for another customer. And traditionally, what we've seen in ISVs that we work with that want to go from on-premise to cloud is that they have to kind of deal with this issue because they're going to combine everything into a single instance. So traditionally, this was done with custom builds per site, so really in the source code, basically. And you can think that this becomes impractical when you move an application to the cloud. By far, the greatest success that we see is when metadata-driven customization is implemented, because in reality, that's not really customization. It's more of personalization, and it's much easier to roll out and maintain. It's really important, though, that you can choose a platform or tooling that supports metadata management, because you have to deal with revision control. You have to deal with deploying changes when you actually release a new version, that you might have some metadata changes there. And you have to deal with conflict resolution. So, for example, you could deploy some metadata which is an initial configuration, but the end users are allowed to override that and specify their own thing. Then you might redeploy that same metadata with a bit of change, but then you have to know that it was overridden. So you have to consider all of this, and it helps to have tools that have some metadata synchronization capability. In addition, you want to consider testing. When heavily customized, you may even need to have a separate test environment for an end user or an end customer, because their metadata now is their own, although you host it, but they can really impact how their application runs. So you have to build in a bit of that as well.
All right, so internationalization is obviously an important topic as you go to a SaaS-based application. And sometimes I talk to American companies and they'll say, well, we don't plan on going out of the US market because the US market is big enough for us. But even if you do that, then very often your customer will drive you to do that, because increasingly your customers will open an offshore facility, or they will sell or distribute into a non-English country. So there are things that you will definitely have to keep in mind when you go to software as a service. And there are platforms today that make this pretty easy to do, that support multi-byte languages such as Chinese and Arabic. So what are some of the best approaches? Well, first of all, externalizing all your strings like labels and tooltips and dialogues, anywhere where text is being displayed. So typically your developers will then use a reference to a label, and that can then easily be translated. Obviously this metadata will have to be managed as part of your revision control and deployment as well. So you could build it yourself or look at platforms that provide this kind of functionality for you, and increasingly those platforms are available. You also have to keep in mind that in some cases your customer may want to do his translations by themselves. So by putting it into metadata, you're going to make that a lot easier, and you could even provide an interface within your application where your end customer can make his own translations of his application. This is very much used in software products that are very industry specific. So if they don't want to change the wording, so some customers may call their customer client or customer or relation, then it's easy to have those adjusted while the application is running.
Yeah, I think it's also important to point out that that localization or internationalization, whatever you want to call it, is of course about making sure all strings are compatible in the language and dialect that the user expects. But we're also talking about really a full experience for the end user, that they get their own locale. So that includes how they format dates and times, whether they see a value in their own currency or not, whether they see a date in their own time zone. So is that automatically being handled across, if Jan is in another time zone and he makes a comment on a ticket or something, and then I look at that and it says that it happened at 11 a.m. my time. So I want to be able to see it in my own time zone. There's also another layer deep that you can go in internationalization with respect to language is the localization of the language. So you may say, oh, we ship everything in English, but we also ship to Canada. And you really want to get that nice experience where they might use a different word, albeit English. So there's the ability to have your language and then your localization, and you can have some tools that will automatically recognize the locale of the end user and switch accordingly. Jan already mentioned multi-byte character support in Arabic and Chinese, but in the end, you need to pick tools which really can support the metadata behind this, and that includes everything from development out to deployment. So if you're doing all of your strings are externalized, is that under revision control? If you go back and you make a change, is that fall under revision control? And then when you move that to deployment, it goes into a database or some flat file or something. Is that part being synchronized for you? You can do this yourself and do it with great flexibility, but it's quite a lot of work, so it's best to choose the right tools if you don't have the resources for that. And finally, can you support customization as one of the other topics of that?
All right. Obviously, another very important topic in building a cloud application is getting ready to scale, because if you look at a traditional ISV, then the problem of scale is very often put on the customer's desk, they would have to manage their servers and scale them as necessary, and the scale is also limited to the size of the customer. With cloud, you'll have to be able to scale to the size of all your customers together. So that means scaling up, in particular in busy times, but even scaling down. When it's not busy, you may want to use less servers or instances for your application to reduce the cost of your infrastructure, but also scaling out to multiple instances so that you can offer a failover to different zones in different data centers in the world if your instances are failing. And last but not least, if your instances are failing, how are you going to recover? Do you have a recovery plan in place? Is that recovery plan tested? And those are all critical topics, and we find that very often ISVs do this as an afterthought, while it is a very important topic. And if you do this as an afterthought and try to stick this to your application that you've been built, then we find that very often the architecture that was chosen initially was not the correct one, and then architects often forget that being a cloud company means that you always have to keep the lights on. Your customer in different time zones is expecting the application to work. You can't go down for maintenance. So that has implications on human resources and on the type of people that you're hiring. So instead of developer type of staff, you will need operations type of staff within your team, or find a partner that can do that for you. So it has impact on the choice of your technology stack. You have to find a technology stack that allows you to scale and to do updates while the application is running, to do A/B testing so that you can run multiple instances of new software. And we find that there are very few vendors that will do this from end to end for you. So to conclude, I think it is quite definitive that the traditional on-premise software is going to go completely or nearly completely away. So if you're an ISV, then cloud should be your long-term focus. And getting there sometimes may take some time and effort. So there's nothing wrong with having a hybrid approach for some time. Maybe first moving your application to server-based approach with a remote desktop into it so that you get used to cloud, and then rewriting it to a true cloud multi-tenant browser-based application. And the question, as you move into that direction, are you going to build your own tools and your own technology stack? There are nearly 100 components that you need, from database to backend tools to front-end tools to UI tools. Or are you going to buy an integrated stack that can help you with that? Because those are basically your tooling options, is to go find platform vendors or to do. And we find that if you're a very large ISV, then doing yourself is feasible. It will cost quite some resources. But if you're a small or mid-sized ISV, then doing everything yourself is going to be very, very complex to achieve. This brings us to the questions. If you have any questions that you would like to email to us directly, then you can find our email addresses on screen, or you can ask any questions that you may have in the questions channel now.
Jan, I see one question that came in.
Okay.
It says, I have many customers which would quickly move to a hosted application, but some are stubborn and I believe will never go. Is it possible to support this without writing everything twice?
Well, that's a good question.
Yeah, I think we hear this a lot.
Yes, we do, yeah. And I mean, technically it is possible. We actually have some customers that do that. We also have some customers that initially did it, but eventually stopped doing it because maintaining the on-premise customers became too much work. So I think if initially you have strong set of customers demanding it, you should probably choose for that approach and support those customers, and then later on decide, do you still want to support the on-premise install base to stop doing that. And you can do that from a single code base, so you deploy your cloud application also on premises. Or what we've also seen a few of our customers do is they would leave existing customers on their old technology stack, and they would develop a cloud application for new customers, and then simply let the customer choose what they wanted to do. One of them eventually also sold off that old part of his company as a separate entity and continued focusing their effort on just the cloud application. There's another question here coming in. Which cloud provider do you recommend? Which is a very valid question, and I think it depends. If I look at ourselves, then we have a partnership with both Amazon, Microsoft Azure, and IBM, and they all have their specific pros and cons. Obviously, if you are very active in the Microsoft world, then choosing for the Azure cloud, it's a very solid offering, can have benefits, like you often get financial initiatives to integrate Office 365 at a lower cost. We actually recently did a full integration into our platform of Office 365, and if your customers are into using Office 365, that can be a very good benefit. If you look at Amazon, then they have the benefit that they are the largest provider, and they're often ahead of the curve in terms of innovation. If you look at IBM, then obviously a very solid company and with a very strong reputation in healthcare and the financial industry. So if you're active in those industries, then IBM can definitely have a benefit in working with you. What we think is important is to write your software package such that you can deploy it on all the major cloud providers by using independent tools that allow you to transition from one to another if that is necessary. Let's pretend that you start with one, but eventually you find out that deploying on a separate vendor is going to have benefits. Then being able to do that is a strong benefit that you can offer to your customers. And obviously there are also smaller players that can also have benefits. For example, vendors specialized in the technology stack that you're using and being able to do a lot of the operations for you. So that is also, if you don't plan to have your own ops staff, then working with a vendor that as part of their offering has an integrated cloud offering can have great benefits.